It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Your host, Chris Carter, here. We're joined by Brian Batko. We're getting you ready for Steelers at Colts this weekend. What do the Steelers have to do to win this game? We look at the defense that has been dominant through 3 weeks, and they have a chance to play a team that can fit the script that they like to play. But facing Jonathon Taylor, who is a prolific running back, do they need to be wary of him? How do they get to Anthony Richardson? All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive Podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by one of our great Steelers beat writers, Brian Batko. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive Podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, including Brian Batko's Tuesday show, Chipped Ham and Football, where he interviews guests every single week. Today's episode is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one that have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, let's get to some football talk here. This Steelers defense is number one in points allowed, number one in yards allowed, number one in run defense. But they're not number one in turnovers. And it feels like in recent iterations, that has been a staple that they've needed to be an elite defense so far, that they have forced some turnovers here. But now they face a team that leads the NFL in interception. Anthony Richardson's thrown 6. But loves to run the football, which does kind of play itself into the kind of script that I think the Steelers like to be in is, hey, if we take away your run game, we can force your young quarterback to make some mistakes here. But what are some of the things that you're looking at from a journalistic perspective as far as things that could end up tripping up the Steelers in this game?
To me, the number one factor is the Colts run game and not necessarily Jonathon Taylor. I mean, he's certainly a big test. Terrell Austin, Steelers defensive coordinator, was talking Thursday about, it's not just his vision, but his acceleration once he sees a hole. And then if he gets to the second level, I mean, his long speed is really impressive. So, I mean, that's what makes him, the quintessential home run hitter. So you do need to be wary of that. But the Steelers have played J.K. Dobbins. They've played Bijan Robinson. Mike Tomlin mentioned that on Tuesday, that they've seen good backs already this season. So I think the unique obstacle here for the Steelers defense is Anthony Richardson in the QB run game and the dynamic that can bring to the table for the Colts, because I do get the sense, you think on paper, all right, you've got one quarterback who's young, hasn't played a lot of ball. He's throwing picks left and right. And then you've got this experienced, opportunistic Steelers defense. They're probably going to pick him off a bunch. That may well happen, but I also think that sometimes in these situations, you're going to have one team in the Colts that's hyper-focused on taking care of the ball. You're going to have one quarterback in Richardson who's probably really, watching the film back right now and trying to make sure he doesn't make those same kind of mental mistakes. So maybe it doesn't play into their hands that way. Maybe sometimes it's easier to get a guy who's coming off a streak with no interceptions and he's kind of bound to throw one. But I think the fact that he is such a good runner, he does have so much athleticism. Shane Steichen knows what he's doing as their head coach, as a guy who can design those quarterback runs. That'll be something that the Steelers really haven't been stressed by to this point in the season. Justin Herbert in a normal situation could do that, but we know he was hobbled, didn't even finish the game Sunday. Bo Nix more mobile than people give him credit for. And Kirk Cousins could barely climb the pocket, let alone escape it. So that to me, the possibility of some of those tricky quarterback runs where they, design runs to get Richardson in open space, that's a sneaky factor to watch this week in this Colts offense, Steelers defense matchup.
And a point you bring up, Shane Steichen, it's not like the Colts are dumb. Like,
Yeah.
like I think that's where people forget is that, like, when the Steelers are game planning for other teams are game planning for the Steelers. The Colts look at the Steelers like, yeah, we know you want to stop the run. We know that you want to put Anthony Richardson in 3rd and longs and force him to make mistakes. We're trying to not let you do that. And let's not forget, Shane Steichen is the coach of the Colts that mollywopped the Steelers 30-13 last year.
With
And
Gardner
granted,
Minshew at quarterback. So there were some limitations there. He also was with the Eagles before that, where now granted that was Jalen Hurts just throwing darts all over the yard, and Nick Sirianni was the play caller. But I mean, he was part of that offensive coaching staff that, yes, made the Steelers defense look pretty pitiful that day in Philly.
Now, granted, that was what, 2022. That was when TJ Watt wasn't playing. The defense was in shambles without him, and they were really banged up in a lot of areas then. And the same thing goes to the Colts game. They were down to like practice squad linebackers, practice squad safeties, and and Mitch Trubisky was the starter. So the Steelers are very much different teams from those times as well. But that's where, again, you have to be mindful. This coach has had success against the Steelers with multiple teams. And he's going to obviously come up with a game plan to try to disrupt what the Steelers like to do. And right now, the Steelers, I said this on 93.7 The Fan with Adam Crowley and Doran Dickerson on the morning show on Friday morning. But like, the Steelers haven't had too many balls bounce away from them this year. They've had some bad calls. They've had, the interception that Justin Fields threw last week, but they've responded to those limited bad situations very well. What happens when a team gets more than just a couple in a game against them? What happens if Justin Fields doesn't throw an interception that's necessarily his fault, but maybe there's 2 passes where, like, hey, it just bounced off a guy's hands and it bounces into the Colts' hand, or like another bad snap happens, but this time the Colts recover it. How does the team respond to multiple situations like that? We haven't had to see the Steelers do that, and that's to their credit. They're not making too many of those types of mistakes, but eventually things like that happen in a season, and I think what determines good and great teams are how you stay out of those situations, but also how you react to those situations. And I think Shane Steichen and the Colts, they're trying to force more of those situations.
Yeah, puck luck, as they would call it in hockey, right? You're not always going to get every bounce. But yeah, I mean, the Steelers defense, while it hasn't been generating too many takeaways thus far, if they were, I mean, how can you even be more dominant than they've been?
I don't know.
Through 3 games. They have some goose eggs up on the board, I guess, if that were the case. But we know they've been getting a ton of pressure on quarterbacks. But once again, I'll go back and look at who they've played to this point. Justin Herbert, with that high ankle sprain, couldn't really move and escape. Bo Nix, I mean, he's got escapability, but that day in Denver, I mean, you hit him with a feather and he was going down. Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt got 2 of the least vicious sacks you'll ever see at the NFL level at Mile High Stadium. And then in week 1, I mean, Kirk Cousins, similar deal there. I mean, he was pretty much a sitting duck if they could get to him. Anthony Richardson's going to be able to, in theory, shake guys off. If he's got a TJ Watt screaming at him, maybe he can make a move to the left or right and evade a sack. And that's easier said than done against probably the best defensive player in football. But he does have more wiggle than those other guys. He's going to be at home where he should be comfortable. And despite, getting their first win of the season Sunday against the Bears and not falling to 0-3, there's been a lot of pressure on him this week in Indy from how poorly he's been playing, missing easy throws, the layups, if you want to call them that. So he should be dialed in if there's ever a time to kind of harness that talent. Now you've got the best defense in the league coming to your house. If he's the player that I thought he was coming out of Florida in that draft a couple years ago, then he should rise to the occasion. But it's still a fact that he just has not played a lot of football. 1 year as a starter at Florida, and even then was pretty inexperienced. And we know he went down with an injury a few games into last season after showing some flashes. So I think it's going to be fun to watch in a game that, I mean, every game's big in the NFL, don't get me wrong, but this one on paper is a little more meh to me because the Steelers are 3-0, and it's not like there's really high stakes for them. Of course, they'd love to be 4-0, but even if you're 3-1, you're still in a great shape in the division. So normally I would say this game doesn't really have my juices flowing, but getting a chance to watch Richardson against this defense that's been teeing off on guys is going to be pretty fascinating.
I think it is. I think it's going to be fascinating. This guy's, I mean, Richardson does make some bad decisions. You look at that end zone interception he threw. Everyone's like, "Whoa, that was really."
I don't
bad.
know if that was. Yeah, I mean that was like he just short circuited. I have no idea what he was seeing on that.
But at the same time, like, this guy's big, this guy's fast. He has a cannon of an arm. When he locks in and he gets the throw that he likes, he can put it right there. The Steelers have to be wary of that. We'll talk more about this matchup as we continue this show. But first, we got to get to our pick six, where we pick 6 other games and see it throughout the weekend and give you our predictions for how they'll go, including those AFC North matchups where the Steelers are currently 3-0 and at the head of the division by multiple games on each of the AFC North teams. Can they expand that lead this weekend? We'll get to all that here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates, where if you're injured or in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. The North Shore Drive podcast is also brought to you by SmartSide. Here's a message from our friends at SmartSide.
Between beauty and durability, making your neighbors jealous has never been easier. Introducing LP SmartSide Expert Finish Trim and Siding, now in brushed smooth texture. Available in 16 versatile colors, LP SmartSide Expert Finish products help create timeless designs and beautiful, longer-lasting dream homes. That's the beauty of brushed smooth.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko here coming at you. We've been talking Steelers-Colts. Let's take a step back. Let's look around the NFL for what is a very exciting NFL weekend. Some big matchups here and there. We'll get to some of the key matchups of the week, but let's also look at some AFC North games. And I want to start with a 1 p.m. game that I think Steelers fans are going to be poking, switching the channel over just a little bit to see how this goes, because the Cincinnati Bengals are 4.5-point road favorites over the Carolina Panthers. And, if you had asked at the beginning of the season, I said, okay, this is one of the Bengals like 30-0. They're going to destroy this team. But the Panthers are coming off their first win of the season. They switched to none other than Andy Dalton, Brian, and this is a chance for the Andy Dalton revenge game. The Bengals are 0-3. They just lost to the Commanders, embarrassed by Jaden Daniels on national television. Their defense can't stop a single thing. They scored a touchdown every single drive the Commanders did in that game. And now you have the Panthers rolling. They got Chuba Hubbard going. Brian, is this a week where the Bengals fall to 4-0? Do they finally get right and get to 1-3?
Fall to 0-4? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I don't love the vibes right now out of Cincinnati, and even going into the season, not great juju with the Jamar Chase drama. We know T. Higgins has been unhappy there for a while. Trey Hendrickson also requested a trade at one point in the offseason. Yep. So, everybody under the Bengals roof just seems kind of disgruntled. Those kind of things worry me going into a season. But all that said, I think this team has too much talent to be 0-4. I think they're going to find a way to win in Carolina, even if it's close. And the Panthers, on the flip side, if we're just going by vibes here, yes, something to be said for momentum, but I think there's also probably we're just happy to be here with a win on our ledger, kind of mentality. So I'll take the Bengals to win this one in Charlotte.
Give me the Panthers. I think they're going to do it. I think that you look at what Chuba Hubbard did last week. I look at the Bengals' injuries on that defensive front, and I think that this is a bad matchup for the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow's still going to Joe Burrow, and he's going to do what he does. He has 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's impressive and all. But I think Andy Dalton in a revenge game, a run game that's emerged for the Panthers a little bit, I think they'll get just enough to get over the hump and find a way to win this game. And the Bengals will be looking around asking, what the heck has happened to this Super Bowl window that we were bragging about for so many years, and now you're staring at being way too far behind in the AFC North race. But let's move along to other games here. Let's talk about a team that the Steelers have played this season, and that is the Atlanta Falcons. They are 1.5-point home favorites against the New Orleans Saints. Division matchup here, Brian. The Saints were looking unstoppable for the first 2 weeks. They were the number one offense in the NFL, and they lost that mojo last week. The Falcons were very close to dethroning the Chiefs and saying, hey, that week one loss to Pittsburgh, put that out of your minds. We are that team this year. I'm taking Atlanta here. They're at home. I like with a lot of the things they're doing, but man, I do think this is one of the closer toss-ups of this week.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good game. Won't be watching it because we'll be watching Steelers-Colts in Indy. But, yeah, I mean, this is always a great rivalry in the NFC South. When I was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, one of my Uber drivers was just talking about how Falcons fans are, they really hate the Saints. So these two teams get after it when they see each other. Saints at 2-1, Falcons at 1-2. It just feels like both sides are going to kind of find their level here, and Atlanta finds a way to get out with a win. Then they'll both be 2-2, and no one will really know what to make of the NFC South as per usual.
That's pretty. It just seems like it's been in perpetuity. The NFC South has just been a mucky mess. Let's get into what I think could be one of the games of the week this week, and that's an NFC North showdown between the Vikings and the Packers. The Packers are 3-point favorites at home. Brian, if I had told you that this was a key matchup maybe like 3 weeks ago, you would have said, Chris, get the heck out of here. Why are we talking about this game? But the Vikings are 3-0. Sam Darnold leads the NFL in touchdown passes. Justin Jefferson's still Justin Jefferson. I think Jordan Addison's supposed to be coming back soon. The Packers, they've been able to deal with injuries. Jordan Love's missed game. Malik Willis has actually played well for them. Heck, he had his revenge game against the Titans last week and actually won. I'm going with the Packers here at home. I think they'll find a way to win. But do you think the Vikings could keep riding this hot streak that they've been on to start the season?
I mean, they could, and it looks like Brian Flores might be putting himself back into a head coach conversation again.
The defense is nasty.
Next offseason, yeah. I mean, he seems to be doing more with less, but I think if there are any offensive coaches out there that I would feel confident in having an answer for that, Matt LaFleur would be near the top of the list, the Packers head coach. And if Jordan Love is back for this, do we know if he's coming back yet?
I think it's still up in the air. I don't think it's officially confirmed yet.
Yeah, I'm seeing a questionable tag.
Yeah,
but either way, I'll just whether it's Love or whether it's Malik Willis continuing to ride this high, I feel like the Packers are just they're another team that's kind of surprisingly rolling right now, rallying around their situation that was tough after losing their franchise quarterback week 1 in Brazil. So I'll pick against Sam Darnold and the Vikings again this week, and I will take the Cheeseheads at home.
The Cheeseheads. Let's move along to a matchup between a team the Steelers have beaten, between a team the Steelers will face later this season. That's the Chiefs at the Chargers. The Chargers are 7-point home dogs to the Chiefs after their loss. Justin Herbert obviously still dealing with injury situations. The Chiefs, they've been able to scrap it out in some close contests. You look at their win over the Ravens, you look at their win over the Bengals, you look at their win over the Falcons. All of those have been very close. Is this the week the Chargers steal their O, or do you think that the Chiefs keep rolling?
No, last I saw the line was actually 8.5 for the Chiefs. So I think the Chiefs win this one pretty comfortably. It just the shine's off the Chargers a little bit last week, mainly because of injury to Herbert, kind of out of their control. In retrospect, I wonder if we'll look back and say, why didn't they just kind of punt on that week 3 matchup with the Steelers? Why put him out there and risk worsening that ankle when he could have had another week to rest and maybe been closer to 100% for the Chiefs? So, no, I mean, whether it's a Herbert who is, not at the height of his powers, or heaven forbid, Taylor Heineke back at it. We know they don't have Derwin James because he ran into Pat Freiermuth's head on that play, which thankfully for Freiermuth and the Steelers, he seems no worse for the wear, but Derwin James suspended by the league for a game for that one. So add all that up, and I think the Chiefs are going to win this one. I don't know if they'll cover, but I think they'll win in LA.
I think they'll win as well. I think that they've played good football. Despite the close contests, I think that they're still that team to beat in the AFC until someone proves otherwise. Let's move along to another matchup here. 2 teams the Steelers will play this season. The Browns at the Raiders. The Raiders are 1.5-point home favorites here. And I think that's very interesting. The Browns have played terrible football. In fact, Thursday Night Football featured 2 1-2 teams that neither looked like they really wanted to win, but both of their ones in the Cowboys and the Giants were against the Cleveland Browns. And that makes you wonder, well, wait a second, are these guys even good this year? I don't know. But I look at this matchup and Brian, I'm looking at this injury report. Yeah, the Browns offensive line is beat up, but man, this defense, the Raiders team is about defense. The Browns team is about defense. This has to be the week that the Browns kind of circle the wagons, protect Deshaun Watson, protect everything, and they get it done against a team like the Raiders. They should be, and they're at home. That's another factor here in this. Or actually, no, excuse me. No, the Raiders are at home. So actually, that play.
Sure, there'll be a lot of Browns fans there, though.
That's true. Las Vegas isn't exactly a tough place to get into for opposing fans. But I still think the Browns find a way to win this game just because of the style of play the Raiders want to get to. But do you see things differently?
Well, I don't really know what to make of this game because of everything you just laid out there.
Yeah.
Two teams that are tough to figure, especially the Browns. But I do know my sister-in-law, who's a Browns fan and is due with her first child any day now. I think the Browns will win one for them. So I think they go to Vegas and win one for the family, and they can feel good about hopefully happy, healthy baby, and also a Browns win at the Raiders. But I could really see this one going either way because things are just as dysfunctional in Cleveland as they appear to be in Cincinnati.
We know you're a double dad already. Will you an uncle already, or will this be your first? Oh,
no. Yeah, this will be my first
for you.
Niece or nephew. Yeah. Pretty pumped about that. I think I'm going to be a good uncle. I think I'm going to be a fun uncle, and that's going to be a good time.
Well, considering all our conversations about Bluey and Marvel comics that you get Dawson into, I think you'll be exciting for whichever niece or nephew you get there. So congratulations to the Batkos there. Let's move along to what I think is the game of the week. It's Sunday Night Football. It's the Bills at the Ravens. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, heavyweight fight there. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites at home, while the Bills have the number one offense in the NFL. And Brian, I have to say, I am somewhat surprised. Not that Josh Allen's a playmaker, but that he is working so well with this group of playmakers. I didn't think Keon Coleman was going to be able to be a factor like this. Mac Hollins or Dalton Kincaid. I didn't think these guys are going to pop off the way they have, but they've been popping off. And I'm sorry, I'm going to believe in that until they show me otherwise. Give me the Bills in Baltimore showing up. Am I crazy here? Am I overlooking the Ravens' ability to make something happen here? Or are you buying in on what Josh Allen's been able to do so far, playing at an MVP type pace?
No, I don't think you're crazy. And I think it is interesting that the whole's been greater than the sum of its parts for the Bills. Like I saw a tweet that was, what's better, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen and four of his best friends? Like, it does seem like everybody is just a little bit more chill up there in Buffalo right now. And Allen, I think, too, had the quote, you never know what's real and what's fake anymore. So I try to vet things when I can. But I think he had a quote that was like, it's great when no one cares how many touches or targets or receptions they're getting in a game. And, it's 1 week it's you, the next week it's somebody else. So I think there's something to that. I think the Bills are already proving to me that they're a better team than I thought they were going to be in 2024. But I picked the Ravens to lose in Dallas last week and fall to 0-3. So they actually showed fortitude before I thought they would. And I think in this one, they rip off two in a row. They come up with some answers for that Bills offense that's just been rolling like a hot knife through butter. But now they see a little bit tougher defensive opponent. And, maybe just a pick here or a fumble there will be the difference. I think it's going to be a great game, probably the game of the week, if you ask me.
I think it's going to be a great game, and it'll be one that we should all be able to get a little bit of reprieve from after we finish our coverage of Sunday 1 p.m. football with Steelers-Colts, and then get to sit down, get some good food, and then turn on the tube to watch Bills and Ravens.
I was thinking of going to St. Elmo's, the famous St. Elmo's Steakhouse in Indy, but I think I'd rather go somewhere with some TVs for Bills, Ravens.
Go to Kilroy's. They got good stuff over there.
They do. Yeah, that's always a fun place to. I never really watch games there because I'm usually there for combine. But we'll find somewhere. We'll find a sports bar in Indianapolis to check that out. I've got my Butler hat on to mark the occasion. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun one Sunday night.
It absolutely will be, but it's going to be a fun one Sunday afternoon. We'll talk about that matchup and give you our predictions here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Chris Carter, Brian Batko from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda. Get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, Car and Driver's most awarded brand in 10 Best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Let's get into Steelers-Colts a little bit more in this game. Brian, I have the line right now. The Steelers all week long have made a 1.5-point favorite over the Colts. Money line at -124. Over under set 39.5 here on the Steelers. Before we get to our predictions, what is the X factor in this game? What is the key thing that if the Steelers do this, it puts them in the win column for a fourth week in a row?
I think limiting the offensive big plays that the Colts can bring to the table. I mean, we talked more about Anthony Richardson in the first segment, and I mean, he does have the kind of arm that can stress any defense, and he's got the weapons to use downfield to put that to good use. Michael Pittman Jr., winning those 50-50 balls. Mike Tomlin really spoke highly of Alec Pierce. He was a guy I thought the Steelers might draft that year. I don't think anybody's disappointed that they ended up with George Pickens instead, right? So that worked out for them. But even Josh Downs, who's a little guy, he can get you deep. And if Anthony Richardson has a chance, he'll put it out there for Downs to run under it. So between that and then Jonathon Taylor, like I said, if he gets a seam, he could be gone. I think even more so than a J.K. Dobbins or Bijan Robinson. He's got some of that just top end speed that can beat everybody to the end zone. So I think if you limit that, keep the Colts in front of you, make them work underneath, make Anthony Richardson actually hit on some of those, short to intermediate throws that he's been struggling with to this point in the season. That would be very advantageous for a Steelers defense that has just been stifling through 3 games. And, it was one mental lapse. I think in my analysis of Steelers Chargers, I thought it was going to be a defensive missed assignment or something that would give the Chargers the win in that game. Joey Porter, he did. I think Justin Herbert kind of gave him the okie doke on that touchdown throw to Quentin Johnston. But, that was really the only misstep for them all game. And they were able to rebound from that. So as long as you don't have too many of those, I think the Steelers are the better team on paper here and should win this one.
I agree. They have an advantage here. My big key thing here is building off of something that they did late last game, and that was they ran the football. Now, through most of the game against the Chargers, Steelers weren't running the football. They were averaging less than 2 yards per carry. The Chargers were just destroying the line of scrimmage, and Najee Harris was getting lucky to get back to the line of scrimmage, let alone 2-3 yards. But late in the game, you saw them, and I talked to Zach Frazier about this after the game. Najee Harris said the same phrase, make them tap out. They were able to tire out the Chargers and eventually take control of the run game in that game. But the Chargers were the best defense going into the NFL last week. They're still the number 6 rushing defense right now. You're now facing the Indianapolis Colts, who are next to last in run defense. And the week after, by the way, you're facing the Cowboys, who are dead last in run defense. And I look at this as an opportunity for a young offensive line, for an offense that hasn't. They talk about wanting to be the bullies. They talk about making it, and they haven't done that in a whole game yet. This is the opportunity to do that. Also, you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. You talked about you want to possess the football, you want to control the pace of the game. They've done that through 3 games. They're number 2 in time possession. Guess who's dead last in time possession? The Indianapolis Colts. If the run game gets going for the Steelers and they're able to build off of that and make the offense flow naturally through that, that will help if they're able to limit the big plays, because then all of a sudden you're going to be putting the Colts, they're going to have limited time to make big plays. Anthony Richardson is going to be under that much more pressure to be aggressive into a Steelers defense that's very talented and looking for those type of opportunities. That's something that I think could be really big, not just for this week, but also for setting a tone that says, hey, we're figuring out this run game and could play a factor into this offense evolving throughout this season.
Yeah, I think, Arthur Smith mentioned that the other day too. Like, you always have, kind of your short-term objectives and then your long-term objectives. I think that's very much an identity that the Steelers want to lean into for the long term. Once you get into those knockdown, drag-out AFC North fights down the stretch, or you're trying to keep the Chiefs and Eagles offenses off the fields in December. But in this game, I just think, the way Justin Fields played last week against the Chargers, I think there's a little bit more margin for error than I initially would have expected, even if they are running into some brick walls defensively, because the Colts, the Colts did, they shut down the Bears running game last week.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first point that Mike Tomlin made Tuesday was, yes, their statistics against the run are not good, but I'm already seeing Gus Bradley, kind of rectify that through their last opportunity. So maybe they have figured out something. It's not like they don't have dudes up front. Grover Stewart, I'm kind of disappointed Mike Tomlin didn't call him a goon. I feel like you usually get one of those out of him. But Zaire Franklin is really an underrated middle linebacker who flies around and crushes people. So, but my point is, though, like, even if they don't establish, Chris, I think they've got a quarterback right now who can beat you in other ways. Even if there's another turnover or two, I think the Steelers can rebound from that better than they could in the days of Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. So I know it was big topic earlier this week on the shows with Ray, but I'm normally objective, super level-headed, don't get too highs on the high or low on the low sports writer guy, but I'm kind of starting to buy the Justin Fields hype.
Uh-oh.
I really am.
Brian Batko believing in Justin Fields. Look out, world. I do think that it continue. I mean, if he continues to win, last week you saw him score 2 touchdowns, one on the ground, one in the air. If he puts together another solid performance here, it's going to further make it that much harder, I think, to put back in Russell Wilson with the offense is humming. So with that being said, Brian, you said you favor the Steelers here. Give us where your turning point you think comes in the game that starts that kind of is like the turning point, the big moment in the game, and what's your final score prediction for Steelers at Colts?
Yeah, I think it is going to be another big Justin Fields throw, whether it's a touchdown or whether it kind of sets up a score. He's just playing with so much confidence right now. I think George Pickens is kind of also a ticking time bomb waiting to go off in a good way, because we saw what happened in a bad way with him last time they were in this building at Lucas Oil Stadium. But he has certainly been, minding all of his P's and Q's thus far, even when the targets and the flags aren't always going his way. I think this could be a week for him to pop off, Chris. I think that'll be potentially a game-changing play in this one. And yet, I can't pick the Steelers to win comfortably 2 weeks in a row. I mean, that's just outlandish. That doesn't happen with the Steelers. I need to believe that, or I need to see that to believe it. So I'll say Steelers 20, Colts 19, with a friskier offense than a lot of people expect. Granted, I said that about the Broncos as well in week 2, and that was far from the case. But I'll double down, and as long as I'm not jinxing it, knock on wood here, I think we get another very short, truncated NFL game that's maybe over in 2 hours, 40 minutes, 2 hours and 45 minutes, something like that, like Steelers-Chargers was.
We love quick NFL games.
Yeah, two teams wanting to run the ball a lot, keep it on the ground, stay away from turnovers. So I think it could be another one of those low snap, low possession games.
I think that the Steelers play that pace for the most part, and I think if they stay on schedule with it. My turning point, though, is going to be the defense. I think it's going to be the defense creating a big turnover, a sack fumble, an interception, a pick six. I think the Steelers get their first defensive touchdown of the year. I think that plays a huge factor into how this game turns in their favor. And then that gives them the chance to pin their ears back even more. And I also think that the Steelers offense does hum a little bit. I do think that they win comfortably here. I don't think it's comfortable until maybe early fourth quarter when this big turnover happens and the defensive score happens. But I think they end up winning this one 30-13. I think they're able to get a lead, stay ahead of the Chargers for a little bit, the Colts for a little bit, and then you see the big mistakes, and then the defense really clamps down, and then the run game grinds the clock out for the win there. And this week they might get that touchdown because again, they scored 20 points last week. Could have been 27 if they wanted to be jerks about it. They chose to take the classy road out, but I think this week they get one of those punch it in touchdowns at the end of the game where Najee Harris or Cordero Patterson figures it out. So I'm saying 30-13 Steelers.
30 could have even been 30 last week because I know Pat Freiermuth was saying after the game if he catches that perfectly thrown ball by Justin Fields, I mean, Pat was like, I have no idea how I dropped that. That was ridiculous. But if he catches that, he's like, I'm sure Boz is getting an easier field goal and he's hitting that, and we've got another 3 points going into halftime.
So there you have it. That's why I'm going 30 points for the Steelers' first 30 burger of the season for the Steelers team. He's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. Brian, you'll be in Indy, right?
I will. Yes.
You're going to be partying in Indianapolis. I will not. I'll be happily taking my pit bye week and relaxing at home. Maybe do enjoy some Will Penn Tavern wings.
Well, it's an open date. They're not really getting a bye to advance into any bracket, but you know.
What do you mean? Open date bye? I don't care. I get to watch Alabama, Georgia this weekend, baby. Let's go.
When I worked on the night copy desk at the Post-Gazette, that was always a point of contention. It was like, even in the NFL, everyone calls it bye week, but a bye is, in a playoff
nerd
where you're getting advanced.
Nerd.
In the playoffs, it is a bye. In the regular season schedule, open date, off week. So, old habits die hard for me.
Nerd. Nerdy Brian Batko here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you, Brian, as always, for joining me on the Friday episodes. And thank you all for joining us here on our Friday North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. As always, find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as all of our daily content from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll be back here Sunday evening. We'll have our post-game reaction show. We'll also have our reporters in Indianapolis giving you their thoughts. Stay tuned for all that action here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.